Good evening, Jeopardy fans, and we are live right on time here with hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel presented by thejeopardyfan.com. Once again, and as always, I am Andy Saunders, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. We have quite a panel for you this evening, and I will get right into the introductions. A pair of contestants from last week, ironically enough, both of them in a rather historic game for Jeopardy, the first ever regular play tiebreaker. I have both of the contestants from that game on the panel tonight, so we'll talk about that quite a bit. Let me get right into the introductions. First up, I'll introduce you in terms of when you were first introduced on the program. So my first introduction, congratulations on your own victories, Laura McLean.
Hey, thanks so much.
And our second panelist, Sarah Norris.
Hi.
So, before I get to talking about the tiebreaker, I think that my first question for the panelists, I've been leading off with this a lot lately because a lot of Jeopardy fans, a lot of Jeopardy contestants, start out by being Jeopardy fans, and most Jeopardy fans, as it were, have an origin story as to how they became Jeopardy fans. So, Sarah and Laura, how did you both become Jeopardy fans in the first place?
Do you have a good story, Sarah?
I don't really. It's just something that everybody in my family always watched. After I got picked to be on, a lot of my dad's family were saying like, "Oh, your grandmother, this was the one show you couldn't talk to her. You couldn't talk to her during Jeopardy." But like, I don't really have a memory of that. But I do remember watching it always growing up, and I think Laura, you might have the same experience, but like I think a lot of people who like Jeopardy, I've always just had like a trivia brain, right? Like I did quiz team in high school and middle school, and I was on like a local kind of TV quiz show program, and everybody was always kind of like, again, I'm sure almost everybody who's been on Jeopardy has this story. You should be on Jeopardy. You should try out for Jeopardy. And it really was something I always wanted to do. I actually, when I tried out, I took the test this time. This was the first time I'd taken, I did not expect to get on. Pretty much this whole thing was my first shot. And that was really unexpected. I expected to try a lot longer at this before I got picked, but here we are.
Yeah, I don't really remember. I don't remember where my first experience with Jeopardy came. It was always kind of there in the background, and I had a similar experience where people would tell me I should try out. I watched it at home. I wasn't an everyday watcher through my whole life, but I always loved watching it when it was on, and I started taking the online test in college. Thinking that, college Jeopardy would be the easy one because everybody was right around the same age as me. So it would be same frame of reference. And I kept on trying, even though I thought, regular Jeopardy, gosh, that's really daunting. Like that's, that's the big show. So I kept taking the test all the time for fun whenever it was offered. But I honestly never expected anything to come out of it. But yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, everyone says, I'm sure that, totally a trivia brain. I didn't have a lot of outlets for it other than just pestering people with my facts that no one else was really that interested in hearing.
Yeah. I heard it described, I think Ken Jennings calls it this in Maphead. He calls it your mental mesh, right? It's just like that brain trap up there that like certain stuff gets stuck in, and somehow you're able to pull it out. I like that mental mesh, like visual, right? It's just stuff gets caught up there.
And some of it is staff, but it's anytime.
Yeah, I have a really great example of mental mesh from the show actually, which was that Three Musketeers clue I answered, which by the way, this is like a side note to our episode. They cut every pause out of that episode. Like every single time that somebody hesitated to ring in, they cut them all out. Mm-hmm. So that Three Musketeers clue, we were all standing there, and I was thinking, and there's Three Musketeers movie where Gerard Depardieu is in it. And I was like, he's the fat one. Which one is the fat one? And that's the answer. So that's a total mental mesh thing. I was just picturing it took me like 6 steps to get there.
I wondered how you could possibly know that because there was no way I was going to ring in on a 1/3 chance. I was like, how did she know?
Yeah, that's it. Fat, drunk Gerard Depardieu.
I think it's interesting, and I think that's certainly part of what can happen, especially with the tiebreaker that happened, that they needed essentially to fit in an extra 17 seconds unexpectedly into the game, or at least 15, 16, 17 seconds, because normally they don't have Alex ask an extra clue at the end of the game. But we'll get into that. Yeah, actually, you know what? That's probably a good spot to start at this point, because I think that's what a lot of people are tuning in for. Obviously, the first ever regular season tiebreaker happened on Thursday night. Of course, Laura won over Sarah. And if you're wondering how long it's been since we've had a tie game, this is season 4 of #Jeopardy Live Panel. The news broke during season 1 of this podcast many, many years ago. So that's kind of how long it's been, but certainly. So I guess my first question, kind of, how did we get there? And obviously, Sarah, I think you have a little bit more to say on this one.
I'm the one that has to answer that. So what happened was, and I wanna set one thing entirely straight. I understand the wagering strategy for Jeopardy, right? I studied it. I understand what it's supposed to be. I get it. I know what it is. So my choice was, I chose not to cover the double up from Scott, right? Again, that was a choice. It's a choice I regret because it would have led to me wagering less money. But I thought, okay, I'm going for the Laura gets it wrong, I get it wrong scenario, right? And if you do the math on that, the number that I needed was $4,800, which is the number I got. So when you wager on Jeopardy, they give you a little piece of scrap paper and they give you a Sharpie and you're doing your math. And of course, I took the longest because I was in the hardest position. And I'm just like, okay, 4,800, and then you take the light pen and you write it down. And I wrote 4,801, and I thought there's something about $1, whatever, 4,801. That's it. I didn't check it. Dumb. And I didn't. The other thing you have to know about wagering is and Laura can talk about this too, it's not like they shush everybody up and there's silence and calming music playing. It's Alex is doing pickups, the producers are yelling at not yelling, they're talking to each other, they're right over your shoulder. It's like doing math with a gun to your head. I mean, it's really, really not serene. So basically I panicked is what happened, if you want to really get down to it. I was not trying to force a tie because this one, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the rules. That's the other thing. The rules were not a surprise. They told us beforehand the rules, but also I knew them because I studied my wagering strategy. And I learned that it doesn't make sense to play for a tie because Arthur 2 basically made the tie obsolete when he kept wagering for the tie, because it used to be smart to wager for a tie. So that's what happened. It was not intentional. It was a sheer moment of panic. And the other thing is, if you watch Jeopardy a bunch, people screw up their wagers all the time. People wager really dumb stuff all the time. It just so happens mine was dumb and smart at the same time. So we ended up with the tie. I could have risked everything and ended up in 3rd place. That would have been just as dumb, kind of, but way less memorable.
Mm-hmm. So, how was it from your perspective, Laura? Going in, you've got obviously you had the easier math there, and so we got through to Final Jeopardy. Both of you missed Final Jeopardy, And Alex is like, and you both are at $67.99. Then what happened?
Well, for me, everything was kind of going in slow motion because, for one thing, I was very unconfident about my ability to do any math, even simple arithmetic under pressure. I was always 100% certain I had made a mistake. When it was a lock on Wednesday, I was like, somehow I'm going to mess this up for myself. Um, it was not. It was not a situation where I ever felt comfortable in wagering in Final Jeopardy. I was in definitely a low level state of panic. So when there was a tie, I was like, well, you've done it. This is what you've always dreaded. You have somehow, snatched defeat from the jaws of victory and managed to create some kind of impossible situation for yourself. Good job. So I was basically spiraling the entire time. So to talk about what actually happened in the studio, they had briefed us on what would happen in the case of the tie, while saying it was they had never had one, but if one happened, here's what will happen. There will be a sudden death tiebreaker. It'll be one question. It adds no money to your score, and it's all or nothing because we don't have co-champions anymore. So we kind of all had that in the back of our heads going in, although it was in a very long monologue, hours long orientation session, that there was a lot to take in. So it wasn't the first thing on anyone's mind. So if I remember correctly, and Sarah, jump in if I skip over anything, the producers were freaking out too. They were very excited and nervous. Nobody seemed sure. I mean, people were, scrambling around doing their jobs, but it was definitely, trying to execute a big plan for the first time.
I didn't get the impression that they had a question ready to go.
No, I didn't.
That's what took so long. 10 minutes, maybe. I don't think that it's like every game has a built-in tiebreaker. Right. They had to go find something to use as the tiebreaker. I think is part of what took a super long time. I also think, Laura, they might have been checking to see if we cheated.
If we what?
If we cheated?
You remember all this stuff about that.
There was all this stuff about collusion, and I think I wonder if they didn't sort of like.
Well, and they may have had to consult with the standards and practices too. There may have been some, consulting on how to handle it to make sure everybody's butts were covered.
Yeah. And they did send up the executive producer and the lawyer again to talk to us.
Yeah. So it was a very tense situation. I was beating myself up. I don't know if you were beating yourself up, Sarah.
I like you knew that I had made a mistake. Like when you see my face on the episode, by the way, thanks a lot, face. But that's because I was pretty sure that I had screwed up. Like I was. Look of shock is not because I didn't know what was happening. It was because like Laura, I was like, I cannot believe that I have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I cannot believe that I have screwed myself over so badly.
So mired in recriminations. Well, Scott is in the middle of yeah, I remember him saying, so I'm not involved in this at all. Can I go? And they were like, no, stand up.
Which, when you watch it back, you can see why that is, because they made it seem like no time had passed at all.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad to have Scott there. He was keeping the mood light as best he could. Although it would have been really funny if they had cut back to us and he was just disappeared. But
and they also, Laura and I both said this on Twitter and Reddit and a couple of other places, but they made us face not only away from the board, but away from the audience. And I think also that's because I was looking at my boyfriend in the audience, because I was like, he was my wagering coach. And I was looking at him like I screwed up. And I think they didn't want us communicating with anybody in the audience or seeing. We basically stood there looking at Maggie.
And the back wall.
Yeah, and the back wall for like 10 minutes. Yeah.
And of course, you were the first one in, Laura, and you won the tiebreaker. Was it? Did you only go through the one question?
Yes, there was only one question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Figured I'd check. I know the last time any of the Jeopardies had a tiebreaker, the sports Jeopardy tiebreaker went triple overtime, as it were. They went to Terrence Jordan won on the third question, and he was.
I can't
even imagine. I think I would have just died.
I think I would have left. Like, the other thing that's good to know is that it's not like it's spelling bee rule. So, like, say Laura had rung in and answered wrong, like I would not have won by default. I would have had to answer the question correctly. I would have gotten a chance to answer the question, right? And if I answered it correctly, I would have won. But if neither of us knew it, that's when you go to the second question.
Interestingly, Interestingly, we have a comment on the YouTube live chat from user Copaceticness. I can only imagine the producer's reaction had Scott buzzed in on the tiebreaker.
I don't know if his thing was on.
Oh yeah, surely I don't think they would have even let him pick up his buzzer. I think if he had picked it up, he would have slapped it out of his hand. There was no joking around at this point.
And by the way, while we're here, while we're talking about Scott, I just want to say that Scott was also an incredibly good player.
Really?
Nobody has gotten boned by the Daily Double like Scott got boned by the Daily Double in that match we had. He got 3 incredibly hard. And if I had gotten, I don't know about you, Laura, but if I had gotten that Scarlet Pimpernel Daily Double, I would have lost so much money. Because it was a category I felt strong in. I would have done exactly what he did. I would have risked a big chunk of change, and I did not know that answer. So he kept me in it. Towards the end, he was getting a lot of those high dollar clues, and he kept me alive. He was a really good player.
Yeah, you guys were crazy fast, both of you. After Wednesday, which no shade at all to Marion and Garen, because they were fast too. You guys were a level faster. It was great.
So while we're talking about shade, if I had played in that Wednesday match, even against you, I'm pretty sure I would have won. You guys had a lot of clues on the board. There was a lot of clues left on the board, and I was like, and by the way, one of them was a huge dollar clue about Amy Klobuchar, who's my senator. It was just part of Jeopardy is just you get the board. The board we had was so weird. Yeah. The alimentary canal, 2 measurement categories, that one category that was just
Mm-hmm.
random questions about seeing things. They were, Jeopardy's partially about getting your board, right? And that one we had was. I'm sure some of the doctors who were there that day would have loved the alimentary canal category,
I had some doctors at my watch party yelling pharynx at the
Oh yeah, that's the one I guessed on. That was a calculated guess. I knew that was wrong. It didn't hurt me, it didn't help me.
Was that the $2,000 clue?
Right before that was the last clue on the board.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you needed to ring. It was a good idea to ring in on that one, even if you have a 1% chance. It doesn't really hurt you that much, and if you get it right, you're in the lead. So
doesn't hurt, doesn't help. See, people, I understand the strategy.
There's a difference between strategy and execution.
Very true.
You can, perfectly. To me, the strategy. It just happened to be on stage. The execution of adding the extra dollar, it wasn't there, and that can happen. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize, especially watching the show. Even people who watch the show and post about the show on the internet don't realize how tough it is until you actually get up there and get on stage.
And that was literally my nightmare scenario. My boss had asked me right before the taping, he's like, what's your nightmare Final Jeopardy category? And I said, some crazy, obscure geography thing. But I was like, if I get a Final Jeopardy that's about geography, I'm just going to risk nothing. And I said that to people. And my boss said she was watching it and she saw the Final Jeopardy category pop up. And she turned to her husband and said, Sarah's not going to risk anything on this. That was my advertised plan. It's what I'd always planned on doing. And I And this is also, I think, goes down to the closeness of the game. I had a really hard time just saying, like, I'm going to risk nothing and I'm going to, like, take myself out of this competitive, flow, because we had been going back and forth so much. It was really hard to sort of disconnect from that and say, I risk nothing. I bet that I don't know this, which is a really hard thing to say,
So, Laura, how tough was it moving on and trying to play the Friday game right afterwards?
It was really, really difficult. I was really shaken up. And I still, at this point, I still thought that I'd made some kind of mistake. I was not thinking clearly about the math about it at all. So I was, I was kind of still spiraling a little bit at that point. So I think I was a little bit slower and a little more sluggish in the Friday game. In fact, when I watched it back, I was like, I'm blinking really slow. Like, why am I blinking so slowly? So I don't know. That to me seemed a little weird watching it back. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but I sure did. So I don't know how much it affected my gameplay as opposed to just it being the last game of the day and I was tired no matter what. But I mean, it sure didn't help. I wasn't. I didn't let myself off the hook until after the tape day was completely over. And I talked to my mom and sister who were in the audience, and they kind of went back over it with me and helped me process what happened from their like perspective as an audience member, that I finally kind of grasped everything that went on and felt a little better about things. But by then the Friday game was already over. So and Matt was a crazy good, crazy fast competitor too. So he's,
If you had asked me after the practice rounds, they have you do a bunch of practice rounds in the morning. And if you had said, write down the 3 people that you don't want to play against, my 3 people would have been Laura, Scott, and Matt.
Yep.
You 3 were all, it was pretty clear that you guys were all good, a lot of knowledge, really fast. Yeah, that's, Sticky was a really good player. I saw him the next day. Okay, so this is a hilarious story. They give you a time when they're going to come pick you up for the Jeopardy, van in the morning from the hotel. And the next morning I went down because I had to know if Laura had won. I couldn't live if I knew whether or not you had won, because we came back and I was like, I hope Laura wins 10 games. Because that would have I was like, I hope she wins a bunch. But I saw Matt the next day and I said, oh, are you going back? And he said, yeah. I said, so you won, because I'd seen him in makeup before I left. And I went down there to like scope it out because I couldn't take it. I couldn't take not knowing. I didn't want to sit there for another episode, but I had to know. Yeah, one of the producers came up to me and they were like, do you want to stay? And I was like, no, please God, no, I'm not staying.
So, moving on a little bit tangentially, with regards to your interview subjects with Alex Trebek, did he talk about what you thought he'd talk about during your interviews?
Yeah, he did roughly for me. They kind of gave me a rundown. The producers gave me a rundown of what was on the card for him. And so eventually, since I played 3 games, there were I think 3 topics on the card, and he got to all 3 of them. So I was pretty well prepared. He didn't take the questions in exactly the way I thought he did, or he would. And he actually cut out, it's funny if you watch on Wednesday, he asked me after, this was the interview question about a train trip through Scotland. And he asked me at the end of that if we visited any of the distilleries in Oban, because Oban is there are a lot of distilleries in and around it. And I just, said something flippant about drinking a lot of whiskey. And the audience laughed. And I was like, oh, that kind of put me at ease. It was nice to get a little laugh. And they completely cut it from the episode. But if you watch, you can just barely hear the tail end of the laughter when he goes into interviewing Garen right next to me. So I was like, that's so weird. They didn't cut out the very last little bit of that. Yeah, I would say basically what I expected.
He took notes on Laura's first answer too. All the producers were like really impressed because
his wife to Scotland. I was like,
yeah. He was like getting travel tips.
Doing exactly what I did. It was great.
Yeah, and so for me, that's pretty much it, like Laura said. They run you down. They prep you what they're going to ask. That was my preferred story that I told about the app. Although he said with help of a friend, I think probably because on my card I said partner. My boyfriend and I have been together for 10 years, right? So like he's my boyfriend, but also like we've been together for 10 years. So then I had to correct him and say my long-term boyfriend, which sounded like totally dumb. But yeah, that's like Laura said, he doesn't quite say it the way that you've practiced it with the producer. He's kind of a loose cannon. But yeah, that was the story that I'd planned to discuss. And my other backups, one of them was really lame about being like a big sports fan, so I'm glad he didn't ask that one. And the other one was
I think your audio cut out there slightly.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you again.
Okay. Weird.
Oh, well. What was the third story? We missed your third story, though.
Oh, it was a travel story. It was about, I almost got stranded on a mountain in Kyoto like 5 years ago.
Okay.
It's a good story. I would like to tell it. But also, about my story, I would like to take the time to clear up that I have nothing but respect for the Jeopardy freaks of the world. I am a Jeopardy freak, you know. That's really the app that Noah built really helped me a lot, and the fact that there's so much data out there about the game is really helpful. You know, it's a good way to study.
And I just want to say, in my own defense, my own tweet pointing out that the J Archive has a wagering calculator is because there are so many people who study the clues and don't notice the fact that there's a wagering calculator. And I've been seeing this for like 10 years now. And sorry, that's my. And I thought.
Well, a lot of people said I didn't wager enough. Because they said, well, if Laura had gotten it right, Sarah didn't wager enough to beat her. And I was like, there's no winning bet in second place if the person in first gets it right. If Laura gets it right,
she wins.
She wins. There's no winning. But a lot of people were like, that's where the Sarah tried to force a tie theory came from, because people thought I didn't wager enough. And I was like, that's not. I mean, there's no winning bet from second place if the person in first gets it right.
Yeah.
Wagering not well understood by those of us on the show.
So, how was it having your air date moved forward 2 weeks? Because obviously you were expecting, I believe it would have been a March 12th through 16th air dates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first episode was supposed to air on Pi Day, which I was very excited about. I was telling everyone, like, Pi Day, don't forget, it's easy to remember. And then, you know, about 2 weeks ahead of time, I got an email from Glenn saying, hey, by the way, it's moved up, which was a huge relief because, I mean, I had been waiting, you know, you wait for 3 months. Everybody is asking you all the time what happened. My granddaddy was so obsessed with wanting to know that he was trying to come up with ways to like break my contract about, you know, non-disclosure without actually breaking it. Like he was suggesting that I write the results down and then hide it somewhere, and he would find I didn't actually tell him what happened. I mean, it was really becoming like an ordeal to keep this secret. So that was the main reason I was happy to have it moved up, because I was like, oh, 2 more weeks, I get back into my life when people are not asking me what happened anymore. So, and you know, we both knew that the tie would be a big deal. So I was just kind of, you know, wanting to see what it looked like on TV and what would kind of ultimately come of it. So yeah, I mean, I was ultimately glad it happened, even though there are a few people I forgot to tell that are not super happy with me. But that's, you that's life.
Yeah, I was, for me, it was also like I was glad to have the cat out of the bag, right? Because, and then and we taped like a couple weeks before Christmas. So I don't know if you had the same experience, Laura, but like at Christmas, everybody's like, so how did Jeopardy go? What was it? And so, like, I had to see like my whole extended family. And I actually was basically insinuating that I had won. Like, not, and they give you a couple tips for this when you feel like, oh, I'm going to be on starting on March 16th, right? Like, that's something they tell you to say, right? Because they don't want you to give it away. But like, even talking about the details, like I was talking about how the stamp has to go back and change. Some of my relatives were like, oh, that means you won. And I was like, people hear what they want to hear. I was really glad for it to be moved up just because I wanted, for me, the only episode was the tie, and I wanted it to be out there and over with. So I could stop worrying about it. Also, I'm going out of the country for work on March 17th. So if it had aired 2 weeks later, I would have been like in Germany for all of the aftermath. Which would have been interesting. I wouldn't have been able to do this or any of the other stuff.
Interestingly, also, I think it worked out in Jeopardy's favor that it got pushed up 2 weeks, because had it not, it would have aired on the Thursday of March Madness, which would have, a lot of people would have missed it. And certainly,
I will say this. When I found out it was moved up, I hated those 2 single Jeopardy categories that were like Aaron, go bra.
Yeah.
Like, screw this, because it was supposed to be right before St. Patrick's Day. And like, okay, fine, that makes sense. But like, I was like, good thing we had those 2 awful pun categories for this to air on March 1st. I was a little bit like miffed about that. Not miffed, but
like saying the word bra about 10 times on.
Oh yeah. The best thing is when I said, what did I say? Go back to bra. Go back to bra for 600 or whatever. So that's like my. If I hadn't ended in a tie, that would have been my best moment on the show.
So, obviously, getting to air the Thursday episode meant you both got lunch on Sony's dime at the commissary. So I get to ask the both of you, what did you end up having for lunch on tape day?
I had barely any penne pasta because I was so nervous.
I had like half a sandwich and like a tiny little fruit cup for the same reason. But I will say this, I saw Laura eating pasta and I knew she was the returning champ, and I was like, maybe she'll be sleepy. Like,
maybe that's why I was blinking so slow.
Maybe. I was sitting there watching you eat that pasta, and I was like, maybe she'll be tired when she comes back. Like,
probably about 6 noodles.
And they give you, the other thing is, in the green room there are all these snacks. Like, I didn't really eat at the commissary because I didn't really eat much all day. But there's no shortage of food there. Like they give you a ton of options to choose from, especially if you're hanging around all day. Here's the funny anecdote. We were going to the commissary and they're handing out our vouchers, right? And they're like, oh, if you go over your voucher, the extra's on Laura. And Laura goes, wait, how much money did I win? Because the episode had just, it had just ended. She was just so, you were so like.
I was on cloud 9 and I completely forgot that money was involved at all. I was just excited to have won. Right. Which sounds spooky, but it's true. I forgot that there was any money.
Well, people to me have been like, oh, well, they should have given you the money even if they didn't let you come back the next day. And I was like, that would have been worse. Like, the money, for me, like, the money is not the most important thing. Like, if I had won with $1, I would have been happy, like you, just to win, just to win, not to be a loser.
You're not a loser, Sarah.
Nobody's a loser who gets on Jeopardy.
That is so true.
Some comments rolling through on the YouTube live chat from Pasha Patterson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face or their opponent starts beating them on the buzzer. I believe this one's coming from Josh Wu regarding the dreaded trying to wring details out of you bits. And Jeopardy tiebreakers equals Jeopardy's own version of March Madness. And from Matt Carberry, for those wondering about the extent of March Madness predictions, Jeopardy airs on CBS to about 23% of the United States.
Which is where March Madness airs.
Yeah. And also from Pasha, the silver medalist fist bump. Pasha was a silver medalist in one of Austin Rogers' episodes. About.
I actually had a fun little Twitter exchange with Austin and Buzzy. When Jeopardy tweeted about the tie, Austin replied and said, "Let's just say I would not have tied," which I initially thought meant he was like, I wouldn't have screwed up the wagering, but now I think he means that he knew the answer.
Yeah.
I think he meant that he knew the answer, and Buzzy replied to him and said, "Oh, same," or whatever. And I wrote back to both of them, and I was like, "Yep, I messed up." And Buzzy Cohen actually very nicely wrote back to me and was like, "I definitely empathize. I made a lot of mistakes wagering under the lights," and and I wrote back to him and I said, I just want to let you know that Buzzy was a huge inspiration for me. Like after the Tournament of Champions, I was like, if I can just go on and be as relaxed as Buzzy, again, not successful, but I really want, that was my goal. And I told him that, and I was like, thanks for all the great Jeopardy. And he wrote back to me and he said that I played a hell of a game, and I was like, nothing else comes out of this. Buzzy said I did good. That's all that matters to me. So I was pretty active on Twitter about it. And that's something really good that came out of it. I felt like that was a really nice exchange, and I was glad that I kind of threw myself in there.
I will say Buzzy really is a mensch, and absolutely, and he's definitely one of the better people in the Jeopardy community for sure. And also, by the way, in case anyone didn't know, it's also his birthday today, so happy birthday, Buzzy.
Really? Oh, happy birthday, Buzzy.
Thank you for being nice to me.
So, how different is it watching Jeopardy now compared to watching Jeopardy before you were a contestant on the program?
Watching your own episodes is you're just remembering everything that actually happened. So, you're kind of watching it and thinking like, oh, I don't remember it exactly that way. Or, oh yeah, I remember exactly what's about to happen when Alex reads the question. You suddenly have a flashback to either answering it or trying to ring in and you missed, you got beat on the buzzer or things like that. But now, I won't say anything about it, but I watched tonight's episode, which is the first one that I wasn't there for the taping of. And I was like, oh, it's exactly like when I used to watch Jeopardy before I went on. I wasn't thinking about what was probably happening behind the scenes. I was just enjoying it, which is nice,
I will say that I am so impressed. Anybody who wins more than 3 episodes of Jeopardy is a hero. Anybody who wins more than 5 is like a superhero, and anybody that wins more than 10 is like a god among men, because it's it is so freaking hard to string those wins together. I mean, like you said, Laura, at the end of the day, you were tired and everybody's good and everybody's smart, and it's just this long, grueling, nonstop day, right? So when you think about Jennings winning 74, that's insane. But just thinking about winning 10, which is a very small club, you realize why it's such a small group, because I can't imagine stringing together multiple days, multiple weeks of wins. I mean, it's a really Herculean effort for anybody who's been able to do it. So I have a lot more, as a non-winner, I have a lot more respect for Jeopardy winners. I feel like a lot of us sit at home and think, I could win Jeopardy. I've seen people say this online on Reddit and stuff. I could win 80% of Jeopardy matches. Okay. It's you show up to Jeopardy and you think you're the smartest person in the room, and then you realize that every single other person there is as smart as you are, if not smarter. Definitely.
So, online testing is this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If you haven't signed up, make sure you go sign up at Jeopardy.com. Do either of you have any tips for anyone who might be taking the test this week?
No, I mean, I think, the test is pretty straightforward. I always tried to make sure that I didn't have any distractions and, that my internet connection was working, and that's pretty much it.
Yep. I would say make sure you register correctly. The one time I tried to try out for College Jeopardy, I messed up the registration and wasn't able to take the online test. So make sure you got that confirmation. And also go with your gut. Like on my in-person test at the audition, I docked myself 2 answers because I went back and crossed out the right answer and wrote something wrong. So
I did the exact same thing.
go with your gut. Your first and when you're on Jeopardy, you're not going to be able to go back and revise your answers. So go with your gut. Go with your first thought. You're probably right.
That is an excellent, and also pay attention to the category.
Yeah.
Often, the one thing that they talk about the most, there's always a before and after. On that question, make sure your response is in before and after form, and that's one thing that trips up a lot of people every year on the online test. So do
They're
I.
asking 14-letter words. Make sure the word is 14 letters, and not
Yes.
13 or 15.
Mhm. Yep.
You might actually
Precisely.
have time to count the letters in that situation.
Mm-hmm. And also, one thing I like to do, make sure, give your, there's no bonus for finishing early. So let the timer run out and don't click submit yourself. And, let the timer run out, because at the end of the timer, it submits what you've got at the end of 15 seconds. So just let it run out, and essentially you'll find yourself really getting into a rhythm, especially about question 10 or 11, and that'll really help you throughout the rest of the test, just having that rhythm of reading the question, thinking about a response, typing out your response, relaxing for a couple seconds, moving on, next question. And I think that is certainly something that could very well be the difference between an extra, or getting a 35, or 3 points for sure, especially closer to the end of the test when when you're in that rhythm. So,
And then after the test is over, go to a bar and obsessively rehash all the questions with your friends.
Yeah.
That's certainly a lot of people prefer to do that online without the alcohol, but if alcohol is your thing, certainly by all means, that is.
While you're at the bar, go to the website and find all the answers so you can score yourself and then berate yourself for not knowing the capital of Zimbabwe or whatever.
So, do either of you have any questions for each other, or even me? As I'm at the point where I am through my own notes. So, do either of you have any questions for each other or myself?
No.
Yeah.
I want to say though that Laura and I, one thing I'm really glad about is that Laura and I caught Laura at breakfast on my way to the airport, and I'm super glad that after the tie we got a chance to talk about it face to face. That was really good. And my friends in my group chat were like, "How much do you hate Laura?" And I was like, "Unfortunately, Laura is super nice. We're kind of buds, so if anybody's wondering, Laura and I are cool. She's a cool person, and I think that this whole thing is just, it's something that doesn't happen to everybody. And even though I didn't win, I've got a really good Jeopardy story out of it, and that's always going to be part of this experience that was great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, I have to say that I don't know if our positions had been reversed, which they super easily could have been, if I would have as good of an attitude and been as sportsmanlike about it as you have. Honestly, I like to think that I would, but I don't know if I trust myself that much.
Yeah.
I have to say, you've been amazing, and I really, really respect you. You were a good competitor who gave me the biggest run for my money I've ever had.
It was a time. I mean, second of all, you were also incredibly sportsmanlike about it. I know that there were people, had they been in your position, would not have been as nice about it as you were. I know if you watch the episode back, you can see it. And Noah saw this when it happened. After Laura rings in and beats me on the buzzer, you gave a big exhale and then you looked over at me and you said, sorry. Like, can you feel like you can see, if you go watch it back, you can see Laura mouth the word sorry because she, I think because we were so close, right? You felt that like, we both felt like we could have been in each other's position, right? So it's like
Absolutely.
very understanding of the whole thing. And you were in no way a sore winner, which again, there are people who would have been, and I'm glad that was, not the way it went down.
So Josh Wu has given us another question for the both of you. When all the hoopla from this appearance dies down, would either of you do another game show?
I have always wanted to do The Amazing Race. My sister and I are obsessed with The Amazing Race. We watch it together over the phone every week when it's on. And so, yeah, Amazing Race producers, if you're out there, me and my sister, we would kill at The Amazing Race. So, yeah, I don't know if it's a little different from trivia, but,
Mm-hmm.
There's puzzles and memory stuff. I'm trying to get back on Jeopardy.
Yeah, the Redemption Island season.
I'm trying to get in that Redemption Island tournament. I'm waiting for the post Trebek reboot. Like I want another shot at this one. I don't care about other game shows. Like I want another crack at Jeopardy. Maggie, Corinna, homie. Like
yeah,
I
would say no to another crack at Jeopardy.
Yeah, I agree. I was like, we'll have a redemption tournament. Let's have a Laura and Sarah and bring Scott back. We'll have a rematch. Like, although, do you remember this when after we found out that it was a tie, when Maggie came back and said, "This is what we call pay dirt." Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
I've been thinking about that all week.
She was talking about ratings.
Yeah. She was like, "This is what we call pay dirt." Maggie was so into it. Like,
yeah, she called me last week and warned me that it might be about to go viral.
Yeah, she warned me too.
I never expected it to really happen, but when people were sending me, screenshots of CNN and the front page of Reddit and
BuzzFeed
article was the craziest one. That one was the one where I was like, this is not real.
I was so mad at that reporter because she went and pulled all those tweets for people who were like, what was Sarah thinking? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you can go to my Twitter and see the thing where I tweeted about it.
No, I thought the same thing. You had your everything in your own words out there. I don't know if you people actually referred to that, but
yeah, I left a comment on that article. Like, go check it out if you want to know.
Well, interestingly enough, I have a slightly different opinion of that BuzzFeed article, namely because it was my conversation that ended up in the article. But
well, there's now a GIF of my face doing a hilarious reaction shot that I have saved on my phone and will use for everything forever. So
I can't believe. I bet maybe if I looked, I can't believe nobody has gifted my like gape mouth, right? Because I was like. You can see it, right? I dropped my jaw. I looked at the audience. I looked back at Trebek. I'm literally just like my mouth is hanging open.
And then also Scott doing this.
Did you see any of the teasers for it, Laura? Did you get those in your market? So right before it aired here, they showed a teaser that was like, this episode goes down to the last second, and they had Scott doing like the shrug and.
Tonight on The Bachelor.
Really, it was.
Well, some of our listeners are also big Amazing Race fans, so I suppose that if that is if you ended up on that, I'm sure they would end up watching you. So thanks to Amanda Elliott for that comment there. Any other questions or comments before we finish up the panel this evening?
No, just thanks again for having me on. It's been really fun, and it's been a crazy week, and glad to discuss it with you guys. And
I just wanted, same. Thanks to the Jeopardy community, right? Like everybody online. I mean, one of my big worries was that people were going to be mean about this, and generally people have been very nice and understanding. I am the pettiest person on earth, though, so I did go find a bunch of people who called me stupid and reply to them on Twitter. But for the most part, everybody's been really nice, and the people who said negative things are not like Jeopardy people, right? They're just like randos in the world. So I said this on Twitter, and I say it again. You know, the J Archive and all of that stuff that's out there, Jeopardy fan, has really helped me study. It helped me get on the show. Having all that info out there, shows like this, is really invaluable. So, you know, thanks Jeopardy community for being awesome. Nerds unite.
So, I'm Andy Saunders. Thank you so much, both Laura and Sarah, for joining me on hashtag Jeopardy Live panel this evening. And we'll be back next week with another episode at 9:15 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.